Just for everyone who's joining in now, my name is Seema Chowdhury. I'm the Vice President, Curriculum and Programs at Harappa Education, and I'm your host on this track, which is called the Education Enterprise. We're really looking forward to having some interesting discussions and lots of questions for all the people who put in the money into the EdTech, and we want to find out what is it that helps you to make your decisions. Okay. Just give it another minute. We are seeing our participants sort of logging in. So just 2.5 years ago, when I moved from journalism into EdTech, I had no idea that the sector would go through the roof like it did. Before we start, did the two of you ever think that in 3 years this is what will happen? Or at the onset of the pandemic, did you believe that this is how it would go? Two unicorns, right? In span of 1 month.
Honestly, we've always believed the sector was large. It's a question of creating. So one thing we've learned is you need some examples of people kind of showing you what's possible, and then a lot more people follow. So you needed somewhat one big success to encourage more people to start stuff. So thankfully, for this market at least, was an example. And after that, it felt like the floodgates were opened. There was a monetization model that was discovered and kind of over time perfected and so on. So I think it's a space. Time has come for more such companies to emerge, and it's such a large market. It's not a winner take all. So many more companies can succeed in this market. So at least we are quite bullish, but it didn't look like that 5 years ago, please. Maybe not last 2-3 years ago is clearer, but not 5 years ago.
Okay, so I'll leave it to Shreyasi to take you through the whole conversation. A colloquy, Dizzying EdTech Heights, Impact, Profit, Scale. We are going to take a closer look at all of this. We hope to analyze through this conversation how real the growth is and whether companies are really paying close attention to the learners, impact, and what are really the learning outcomes. We have with us Namita Dalmia and GV Ravishankar. Shreyasi will do the longer sort of introductions. Leaving it to her and really looking forward to lots of questions and some really engaging debate here. Thank you.
Thank you, Seema, and welcome GV and Namita to Harappa Bridge 2021. I'm so excited to have you with us. To everyone who does not know Namita and GV, between the two of them, they've seen the rise of EdTech in India. And between the two of them, they sit on the boards of Byju's, White Hat Junior, or have been board observers in White Hat Junior, Vedantu, Doubtnut, Eruditus. So a really rich experience. Of course, GV is the managing director, Sequoia India, and Namita is in the throes of building an exciting new venture fund of her own called Enzia. But of course, her work with Omidyar Network Partners in India, especially on EdTech, has been something that we all study. So let me get right into it because we only have 30 minutes and lots of questions. So let me address the white elephant in the room, Namita and GV, right? We have a fourth EdTech unicorn in India in 7-8 months. People who don't understand the space are confused. Critics will be unfair to say that this is undeserved. But I think more than that, there's a genuine curiosity, at least among our audience of decision makers in campus, as well as in enterprise custodians of talent, that how does one make sense of the kind of dizzying heights that EdTech has done? And how does one deconstruct the skyrocketing valuation or belief that investors like you have behind a segment like this? Namita, let's begin with you, and GV, if you can come in after that.
So I think as GV was saying earlier, the sector was just waiting to unfold. It's not the first time entrepreneurs had tried to build businesses, but I think the geo revolution in certain way had let online learning possible, especially starting from 2017 onwards. And we've seen online learning companies being created. Of course, there is Byju's, which started as a tablet first self-paced learning model and has been also very, very successful. Online learning also started taking shape as COVID accelerated the momentum, forced both students and parents and teachers to go online. It's also very, very large markets. Let's not forget that education is one place where people are spending money, right? They spend money right from childhood to all the way to higher education. India is probably one of the very few markets where actually parents spend money for children's higher education also, right? So the profit pools have already existed. It's that technology now started to make sense from both delivering quality and scale. Of course, there are challenges yet to be solved as businesses are being built. Initially, it was about scaling. It's also about proving unit economics, but also at the same time, ability to show outcomes and demonstrate outcomes at scale, because that will be important to not just build big businesses, but long-lasting businesses, right? And so has been true in the offline world also. So I would say this was waiting to come. And the story has also just started to unfold. There is a lot of room for both existing and new businesses to keep innovating and building for learners in mind.
Great.
Namita, so as Namita has addressed most of the important points here, so I think valuations are a function of what is expected in a way of the future, right? And the future here, seems bright because the markets are so deep and many of these companies are still getting started. Let's not forget, of course, two ways to look at it. One is none of these companies, actually very few of these companies were started 1 year ago, 2 years ago, unlike say fintech, where you're seeing billion-dollar valuations so quickly, etc. Many of these companies started many years ago, and education is a brand and trust business at the end of the day. So while Baiju is getting attention now, he's been around for a fair bit of time and had delivered for the product at that time when he started, which was MBA coaching and so on. He had actually for many years delivered outcomes for them to build trust as an education company, and then later expanded into K-12. Even an academy is now 3 or 4, 5 years old, if I remember correctly. So many of these have been around. I think the attention is coming on them because they're now coming to a scale where these are looking like these will become very, very large companies in the future, and people are paying for that option to be a part of those journeys that are still early days in many ways. I think that's the most important thing to remember. Now, obviously, these valuations have to translate into real value in the long term by companies doing the right thing and continuing to deliver on the growth metrics from a business perspective. And more importantly, these have to work for the consumers, the learners, the parents, for what they're paying for as well. But we are confident, given many of these companies are still in their product creation mode, meaning there are several iterations. The companies are just changing so rapidly in 1 or 2 years that they're investing in technology to understand learner behavior better, and trying to figure out how to do better. And some of the things we're seeing about acquisitions and so on are also enabling this, right? So they're buying technologies, they're buying content and things that can deliver better quality learning. And so we do expect, with the capital that's raised, some of those measures beyond just revenue growth, hopefully we start to see.
Okay, so both of you essentially seeing 2 or 3 things have happened structurally. One, of course, the advent of bandwidth through the geo revolution has made any technology-enabled business much more viable for scale. Second, obviously, this kind of once in a lifetime, not even once in a generation, once in a lifetime acceleration of adoption that the pandemic fueled is obviously the second. And third, the point that you're making, GV, is that these businesses had started 7, 8 years back, and now we're starting to see the fruition of those efforts triggered by some of these structural and access shifts. I keep saying we started to Harappa 2.5 years back. Thank God we did, because I think we've got some advantages, but I keep wondering what would have happened had we started 2 years back, right? But the point that's coming, and you're already starting to see that from the audience responses, that the pandemic question, that's a fact, a pandemic question, if it has been so germane to some of the growth that we're seeing in the sector, as we're seeing in fintech or health tech. Do you think, given that we're still in the pandemic and it's not a post-pandemic world and it's been 18 months, the shifts that you are seeing are permanent or for sure, and that really we have to stop dropping online learning from learning, because all we will have is learning, and there'll be bad learning and good learning, but not online learning and offline learning? Do you think that's the next 2 or 3 years? for EdTech entrepreneurs like me to think about it in that way, that we're as mainstream as any offline institution?
Maybe I can go first. So I think actually what pandemic led to, one was of course larger consumer awareness and need to just start learning, right? Where learning was stopped or halted for a considerable time. I think there was also shift in the industry itself. So let's not forget that, right? Like because education was starting to become an important need to be served, we also saw a lot of new entrepreneurs jumping into the sector, right? And this is that virtuous cycle that, again, Jeevi was talking about in the beginning, right? Once you have a few success stories and once you see the industry working, you will see that virtuous loop kick in, right? Where you will also see more and better entrepreneurs like yourself, like come and build businesses, right? And the third thing was also happening was now learning was in the face of consumer, in face of parents, and the healthy challenging around quality became an important one, which was not necessarily a question people were necessarily raising. People send their kids to school and then forget about it, right? And then look at the report cards. But now the teacher is in your house every day, right? So you are able to see what is the quality. Is it really happening? Is my child really learning? Is academic enough? How do I give the extracurricular or inculcate hobbies? And also for the older population, right? Is college doing justice, right? Of course, I go to college and have fun, but where is it taking me from an employability perspective? The jobs market are unclear. I need to definitely get into it. I need to upskill myself. The entire economy is changing. So a lot of questions were being thrown, right? And those questions is also leading to that acceleration of entire technology or learning adoption, right? In terms of what may happen structurally in the market, I do think there will be some hybrid of offline and online, right? And I think it will be great if people start really thinking about it, learning and just a continuum and not necessarily segregate EdTech online versus offline, because that will really help everyone, right? Because ultimately it is the learning piece that we are trying to address through all of this.
Yeah, Jeevi.
Yeah, I don't think there's any magic or a silver bullet in all of this, right? So I do think there's a lot of attention on online education, but the truth is, like Namita was saying, look, it's all visible. Like in the initial few days when my son's school was online, we felt like, wow, my son gets to sleep extra, no travel, he's, at home, more time to study or play or whatever, coding, that's what he does. But then very quickly became clear that, look, the schools were not equipped to deal with it also, right? So you see some of the disadvantages of online only learning. There is absolutely no connect with the teacher because everybody's a box on the screen, right? So you start missing the more social aspects of education, the peer pressure / positive way competition, etc., that motivates people. So I think there are benefits of both. I don't think there's one single answer on these things, and I do think people will evolve model which leverages the power of technology, but also does not, give up the benefits of offline classroom learning. So I would expect, things to come back as a, better integrated answer post the pandemic versus it being either just offline or online, right? I think those boundaries will blur, and including teachers who have had a tough time adapting to some of this. The reality is that all of us are forced to use technology. People look at things like online grocery, everything has gone up. The adoption rates have gone up because people have just had to use this and they didn't have a choice. And then once you get the benefit of the convenience, then you're going to use the power of technology in many ways. I'm pretty sure in the future teachers are going to share more content with their students on online platforms. All of this is going to emerge, which were big difficult areas for companies to sell and push because nobody wanted to do those things. And now this will become second nature. So I do think the future is a kind of a mix of both, and hopefully you will see a better outcome for all, thanks to the pandemic in a way. I mean, many things went wrong, but maybe some good things will come out as well.
Yes, I think what both of you are saying, and I think what's really going to be the reality is that there will be certainly more online learning in all our lives than there was 22 years back. But will there be only online learning and possibly not? Because I think the school or any physical format also has other advantages. And I think there's an unbundling almost of the school to say, hey, content, I can actually teach my son maths by myself, but it's to learn interpersonal skills or to learn discipline or to queue up or simple things like that, which your school structures teaches you. It's very difficult for me to do that. Like, let me attack another problem, which is really part of the theme also of the conversation around dizzying EdTech heights in terms of profit, impact, and scale. Let's attack the impact problem, because I think because I always think of the fact that there can be crappy offline educational institutions as they are crappy offline curriculum, terrible teachers in the offline world. Just to assume that there's a human being standing in front of you and teaching you does not mean that they're good and they're teaching you well. But what is it about the growth of EdTech and the growth of online learning firms that makes people so skeptical of the fact that it is impactless? Is it, and let me ask you the question, is it because so much of it is in test prep or in exam-driven kind of market opportunities? And is that why, and you think it's unfair that it seems like online learning is impact poor and scale rich?
I'm happy to take that. Or Namita,
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, it baffles me that that people kind of have a certain type of measurement for online, which seems to be not the same questions that we're asking, for things offline, right? So in a way, look, when you send a child to a school and they come back, and if the child fares poorly, the blame is on the child, right? Most often we're saying my beta, beti, whatever, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But if you are, using an academy or Baiju or Vedantu, then like, oh, they are not doing a good job. Like, right? So the issue, I feel is a little bit of maybe unfair measurement. Maybe it is also coming from the fact that there is just too much expected of something that is spoken about so much. It's possible that the expectation setting, there is a mismatch here. The truth is, look, there has to be, like, you need kind of both hands to clap and create sound. You need students to be motivated and you need the product to work, right? So with the same set of products, how is that some people are achieving much better results and some people are not? And it's the same as school. There are some kids who come and get 90% marks in some similar same school, same classroom. Some kids get worse, right? So one, there is a shift and people need to get adjusted to new ways of learning and see how to leverage that well, right? So a lot of these companies are building technologies that are more adaptive. If I were to say, I think this is a substantially better way of learning, but you still have to put in the effort. You're not just going to learn, right? Until technology comes where maybe you can just plug something into your brain and then everything is there. That's not happened yet. Maybe that will also happen someday. Till then, it's still effort, right? So you will have to put in the effort. And for some people, that medium will work less well. It's just natural learning choices. We all know there are various ways you can teach and various ways children will learn particularly. And for some, it will work really well. For some, it will not work. But that said, I do think it is important over a period of time that all these companies invest in understanding how well, is their mode of delivery resulting in outcomes. And to whatever extent they can track that, I don't think they can be, asked to make somebody who's not putting in the effort to become a genius or score more marks. But to the extent that people are spending the time, you will have to start seeing results. And that's an important thing that companies should track. And most of them do track some of these metrics. But unlike the coaching centers would say, my top students, and here is what, like, you will become something, I also don't think some of these companies are offering that, right? The most important impact metric, in my opinion, is one of access. So why are we not talking about access? Why are we not measuring these companies in saying, okay, 5, 10, 15, 100 million people are downloading this app and getting some access? That itself is impact. And then, impact measured as outcomes is a second stage, right? But the first stage, let's remember, offline has not delivered scale. And that's one thing that, online companies are doing. Let's first celebrate that. And then as they evolve, let's ask them the tougher questions on impact, because remember, this industry is still only 5, 10 years old. Offline schools have existed forever. Like, let's not be unfair to the companies that are, starting to do this now. Look, we can always make a comparison on valuations and impact, but I do think it's an unfair ask. I do think first give people a chance, let the companies develop, let them have cycles, and let them have more data to actually continue to create better products.
Sure. And also I'm going to texture and nuance that conversation because I completely agree, because I feel like the yardsticks are completely different. And just because we all went to all good colleges and the top of the degree and the credential have so much, I don't think any one of us really knows what we were taught, right? So this thing about learning outcomes beyond the degree, I'm not sure how much marketing anybody learned in an MBA or whatever it is that we learned in anything. But why is it so different? Why are the scales so different? Because in India, even in K-12 primary, unlike many developing countries, we were already such a high percentage of private education in even primary schools in India, right? I believe it's upwards of 50%. So these, seemingly for-profit companies in EdTech, where do you think the backlash is coming from? The point to what GV was making, I keep saying that, listen, this first wave of EdTech firms and online learning companies, whether it's Harappa or anything, it's like the black and white movie, but things will evolve. We will be watching 4D IMAX and Iron Man and Superman on 4D IMAX in 5 or 6 or 7 years, right? But why isn't that the patience which we've had with terrible teachers and terrible principals in schools all our lives, but don't want to have that? And there's a question in the audience to say, listen, as a parent, I've suffered terrible customer reviews, and then I see those companies doing really well. How do people reconcile those kinds of things?
Yeah, and I think the trust issue is to be bridged, right? So, it's important to recognize that there is a trust issue. And I think both the entrepreneurs and investors will need to play their part in order to kind of bridge that issue. And hopefully the offline education community will also play that part to kind of, bridge that gap. So one of the things that we believe and we are starting to experiment with is to really have a conversation with a company that we diligence at early stage to actually define their North Star outcome metric, right? Just define it in terms of what are you trying to chase for the customer. And once they become a portfolio company, we actually spend time with them to define that and identify the leading indicators that will start giving us a sense of that, we will reach there. We will get to the outcome metric. And frankly, there is a huge business sense in that. If you really think about it, it's quite simple, right? Like the sooner you're able to show outcomes, the better your brand will be. You will also be able to get existing customers to give you referrals. The word of mouth will spread, right? And you'll be able to balance both outcomes, quality, and lower customer acquisition cost, right? So in all, you'll be able to win trust and thrive, right? So I think that if the entrepreneurial and investor community, if we can take charge of that and really come together as the ecosystem to do this, because this is non-trivial task, right? As G was saying, right? We're also probably putting too much burden on entrepreneurs to start doing that too early on, right? But if we put our minds to it, say, okay, what could those metrics be? How could those be implemented and measured in an agile manner while robust manner, right? That will require investment of time and spending, and boardroom conversations will need to change in order for that to happen. But to recognize that impact and financial can actually go hand in hand, I think by doing that, we'll be able to hopefully bridge that trust gap.
Yeah, and I have two of India's best EdTech investors, and we are in the middle of a fundraising round. So I have to ask you talk about North Star metrics. Now, when I'm pitching to people like you, what are the North Star metrics that you really look for? Because we had another session earlier in the day about EdTech to learn tech and what will it take, right? And there was a thing about first was access. And I think GV's point is, listen, even just on access is a huge win for new entrepreneurs and new companies in the space. And the second sort of Maslow's of outcomes and impact was on completion numbers, on custom learner NPS, on repeat people coming in to do other things. And then the third Maslow's would be really what did you learn and how do you use it in your way. So which are the North Star metrics, that 3 non-negotiable North Star metrics that the both of you look for?
So I think some of the metrics on retention, engagement, growth, right? These are business as usual, right? When you really talk about from a learning perspective, access is important. Access to whom is also an important indicator. The other one important is to actually define what is the customer outcome you are chasing, right? So for some places, it's much easier. It probably is binary, right? Like, for example, did you get a job at the end of a program? Did you not get a job at the end of a program? But for upskilling companies, you may need to spend a little bit more time to really define, like, what does career progression even mean, right? For, again, test prep, it may be much easier because you can say percentage of students who are able to do it better than the others, versus, like, for an early early grade child, how do you define outcomes, right? And that's where actually in education itself, there is a lot of work to be done to redefine outcomes itself, right?
Totally.
We are also working in that industrial age outcomes definition, right? So there's also an opportunity to do that. But I think, so what we talk about is, can you at least define it? Can you do an exercise to say, what does success look like for your customer? It will take you time to define that, right? But once you've defined that, what are some of the leading indicators which you can start measuring at year one? At your PMF, you can start measuring for it, right? Not necessarily at scale, right? And in an agile manner, right? Because I don't want to do randomized controlled trial to measure it, right? Because that will also be unfair. So those are kind of things we mean when we talk about North Star outcome metrics. And that even one metric, North Star outcome metric, it's not about three, is important enough to define upfront.
Sure. GV, your 3 North Star metrics, and does completion define learning? Does retention and renewal define interest in learning and outcomes? How longitudinal do outcomes need to be? Which are the 3 that you look out for?
Shreyasi, I don't think we look at it as educational outcomes being the measure of success at this point. I do think, again, these are early days, and given time and capital and data that people collect, these things get better. And it's a very aligned thing, right? I don't think a company can stay or get large or become valuable if they're not delivering on a core promise, which is learning. I mean, these are all companies that are delivering learning. If you don't deliver learning, how do you get large? So there is proof of the pudding is in people kind of both buying and renewing and continuing to be with you. So from our perspective, look, that those metrics tell you a lot already, right? And then there will be improvement areas for sure. Not everything will be okay. You will have to keep analyzing why people are not renewing, understand what's not working, how do you improve, some of those things. Completion rates are important because that's an indication that, there is engagement, and the assumption is the more time is spent, the better learning there is, right? So it's not about, just most things are about spending the right quality and quantity of time to engage on something, because, you will get better if you put in the effort. And so no taking away from this. So a lot of the things is around engagement metrics. So you don't want somebody to come and use your product for 5 minutes a day and expect outcomes from that. That's not going to happen, right? So people talk about 10,000 hours, right? If you want to become really good at something, you have to spend that time. And so the biggest problem to solve is engagement. For most companies, look, do you have an engaged audience? And that will show up in some of these metrics, completion rates and so on. And then outcomes in the higher education at least will be linked to some level of jobs or progress made in careers. And I think, eventually in India, people do care for it a lot. It's not just about the learning, it has to be progress in their careers. And so those are things we look for as proxies. But the fundamental thing is, look, are you seeing the sucking sound in the market for what you're offering? Are people coming to, are you growing fast and are you retaining your customers?
So to people who are asking, so North Star metrics around engagement, completion, coming back, I think those are, especially companies like ours which work with adult learners, right? And where, there isn't whatever with adult learners, that you have to trust the learner, that if they're coming back to you for a second course or a third program, they are seeing value, right? And I think to your point that those are still at this stage of the evolution of the market. Those are very, very important metrics. I'm going to synthesize a couple of audience questions, right? There is one thing about aggregated monopolies that are coming up. And the second about like White Hat Junior created a whole new industry around coding, right? What are some of the other areas in the talent continuum, talent development continuum from K-12 till, executive education really, or continuing lifelong education, which you see are going to be emerging as the big spaces?
Yeah. So I think first of all, the definition of education itself has, grown, right? It's good to see that we're not only talking about test prep or K-12, right? So even within K-12, it is about academic and extracurricular learning, right? And then that K-12 is also, you can even start from even early on, right? Because we know that the child's brain development happens at between age 0 and 5, right? So even there is a role for learning there. And then when you extend it and you go to the adult learners, right? So from skilling our first time working population, whether it is, directly reaching consumers or in partnership with colleges, there is a lot to be built. Even national education policy says Today, we are at 25% gross enrollment ratio. We want to take it to 50%. And think about when you have to do it with quality, right? So there is no way we cannot have technology players work with existing institutions or doing it on their own to kind of do that, right? And again, the casual learning, interest-based learning opportunities, companies are being created. I think there's one more area we have to really remember is that formal sector jobs are only so much, and a lot of Indian economy is actually informal, right? And we know from other sectors that the businesses, the micro businesses also leverage mobile phones to increase their business income. Today, they use it to sell or to integrate with supply chain, but they're also using mobile phones to learn, to upgrade themselves, to actually use that to leverage their business income, right? So you're now, from an education or a learning company perspective, you can actually touch the life of people and help them improve their productivity and social life and interest-based life across the continuum. So that's how we see the opportunity to be really, really large. And then different kinds of companies and models will emerge to cater to different segments.
Yeah, like one of our biggest things that we feel very gratified at Harappa is to have learners from 18 to 45, because skills like speaking, writing, presence, critical thinking, negotiation, really you need them at different levels of proficiency throughout your career. GV, we have a minute, like we had predicted the half an hour would go just like this, and it has. So you have a minute to close it for us. And what big segments are going to get created, categories? I
think, we are seeing the institutions lag consumer markets. Whether it's the higher education institutions or schools, they have not yet come significantly into adopting technology or using services. I do think time has come for that to change, and COVID would probably result in better acceptance of those things. So we should see a lot more upgradation of existing institutions in partnership with outside folks that understand technology, and to really give the power of technology to learning for these institutes to, I think that is an opportunity, and I'm hoping we start seeing more in that opportunity. I think Namita covered skilling continues to remain a huge challenge in India. I wish to see more scalable models and approaches, that will make that happen. Again, K through 12, we have seen the benefits of people learning a skill like coding, etc. But there will be others that are, a lot of people are now started thinking about extracurricular activities and platforms around that to aggregate demand. And so I think those are all good opportunities. And eventually, I think the largest opportunity is, making India the global hub for education in some way. We have the power, we have the resources, we are early adopters of, in many ways, we are big adopters of technology on the consumer side. So why can't we see the next IT services type wave for education globally come out of India? I do think that's the biggest opportunity here.
Absolutely. And I just want to say that, listen, in India, we don't have a choice to choose between offline and online for the skill and talent gaps that we have. We need online and offline. And as much as we need niche solutions in the physical world, we need tech-enabled, very large-scale solutions for the kind of numbers you have. Otherwise, how are you going to get enough features? And already, I think what's very exciting and something that even people who are skeptical of some of the things that are happening to EdTech firms is to say that already after US and China, we are the hub for great EdTech innovation already in the world, and so much learning is happening. Thank you both thank you to both Namita and GV. Thank you for joining us at Harappa Bridge. Seema, over to you. And sorry about being 2 minutes late. 3.
No problem. Thank you so much. It was really insightful. Everybody, our participants who are here, we have our last session of the day happening on track 1. The links are already there. It is Mr. Lakshman Narasimhan, Global CEO of Breakout. Please do join in. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.